Senior Warrant Officer Advisor to the Chief of Staff of the Army, CW5, Yolandria Dixon Carter. Ms. Carter.
Good afternoon. I feel like I'm on my tippy toes. I'm trying to adjust this here. All right. May I take this off? Wonderful. Good afternoon. Yes. Yeah. So it is an honor to be here on today. I'm excited about it. I'm energized. I've walked around since last evening, got lost, ran into some interesting people and some interesting things, and I'm just excited about being able to stand before you and to talk to you all, and I hope that this is going to be interactive. I want to give a special shout out to Mike. Where did you go? Mr. Lewis, for the invitation. He's somewhere running around. I see him in the back. But and to Quad A for everything that they did to make sure that we were able to get out here on today, right? So we're going to jump right into this. Oh, I'm sorry. I control the slides. So there's not a whole lot that you haven't already heard today from General McConville, General Hokanson, General McCurry, and General Dingle, if you were in some of the sessions or the breakout, right? So I have about 30 minutes to stand before you, and really what I want to do is I want to hear back from you. So I kind of will speed through some of the slides a little bit, right? And so the first slide that we have that's showing, I'm no longer controlling them. If we could, yep, that one right there. So some of you may have seen a previous version of this slide, and we've made some tweaks on there, right? And so we know that the number one priority for our Army is people first, and readiness follows, and then modernization. And so we're about building cohesive teams that are highly disciplined, trained, and fit, who are ready to fight and win our nation's wars, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, right, and so earlier today, General McConville talked about C3W. Does anyone remember that was in the session? What was C3W? Capability, capacity, competence, and the will to fight, with the will to fight really being big key. And we learned some of those from Ukraine and Russia, right? Because the capacity, the capabilities, and the competence, right? We help with all of that, but they had the will to want to fight, right? They're still fighting. They have that will. And so as a soldier, these are some of the things that General McConville and the other Army senior leaders are asking also, you know, as we modernize and as we are ready. We can have the right equipment all day long, but if we don't have the right people in the right place with the right desire to win, right, the equipment doesn't matter. And so what we want to do in terms of people is we want to invest in our people. There are a lot of initiatives, quality of life, that has happened across our Army. And sometimes what happens for warrant officers is because we take care of everybody else, and we kind of fix those problems as we go along, and they never really hear from the warrant officers in terms of quality of life, housing, spouse employment, child care, and health care. So they kind of leave us out sometimes out of that population. But now, warrant officers, the voices are being heard in terms for housing. We know that there were a lot of things dealing with housing when it came to MOLE, however common space. What was not on the radar is that our warrant officers that are staying in government housing, where do they fall in terms of housing, field grade officer housing, or CW5 housing, right, to get 06 or even 07 housing for that. And so that is also now a part of quality of life where we're looking at for warrant officers. When you go on an installation, you sign up for housing. They are giving you housing based on your grade, field grade officer or senior housing for that. Readiness, right? We're talking a lot about readiness. We're out here with this massive, Quad A that looks like AUSA in October to me. I mean, I'm blown away by all of it, right? But we're talking about readiness. What do we want to do? We want to develop and retain technical and tactical overmatch, right? We want to make sure that we're not just able to fight the enemy, but we want to deter them in the event, we want to deter them, operate and train so that we can deter the enemy. And if we have to fight, we want to be trained and ready to fight. So how are we getting after that? Warfighter exercises, our combat training centers. We're doing Pacific Pathways, Defender operations over in UCOM. There's a lot of that's happening. We traveled here, been traveling in a lot, and we have presence in over 140 countries. And in the bulk of those countries, we have warrant officers that are present in those countries, right? We were over in Europe in December. We were in Panama and Honduras earlier this year. And I would tell you, aviation presence is everywhere. And the aviators, the pilots there are doing, and our maintainers are doing an amazing job over there and what they're doing. So when we were in Panama and Honduras, we had the opportunity to see some of the humanitarian services that our aviators were doing over there and how they were moving some of the local nationals, helping them to modernize some of their schools, their churches, and what they were doing over there. But all of that came from training. They were learning those things while they were at their local installations or when they were going over into CTCs for that. So our readiness and what we're doing in CTC, has anyone been to a recent CTC? Recent, right? And so did you experience anything different from when we went over 20 years ago? A lot of rigor that's going into it. And what they're out there doing is they are grading you based on your performance. They're not just letting you go through it, right? It's real life training operations. It's no longer where, it's brigade, it's divisions that are actually in the fight now and not just your brigade combat units, right? Your division headquarters element. How are they training and how are they equipped and ready to fight? 3rd Infantry Division is one of our divisions. We're calling it our modernized division because a lot of the equipment that the chief talked about earlier today, those 24 pieces of equipment, a lot of that is now being fielded at 3ID, and they're taking those into the CTCs and warfighter exercises to see how well they're going to do in those operations. I'll pause there if there are any questions, people, readiness. Like I said, I'm kind of speeding through this, and I do apologize. We have about 30 minutes, and I do want to hear from you all. Modernization, there's not a whole lot more to say about modernization. We're trying to revolutionize the way we fight, the way we learn, and the way we manage talent. That latter part, you'll hear about that a little later on from Mr. Rick Knowlton in the panel, where they talk a little bit about talent management, as well as our learning, trying to modernize our professional military education. Mr. Steve Kilgore was very pivotal in starting and setting a foundation for that, for our PME modernization, not just for aviation, but for the entire cohort, because he recognized and was able to get the senior leaders to recognize that we have to do better in our professional military education. If we want better warrant officers, regardless of the 17 branches, over 40 specialty MOSs, then we have to train them. We have to invest in our schools, right? Not just from the candidate school, not just from basic course in aviation, but in our intermediate schools, intermediate level education, as well as our senior courses. We have to make it relevant to what we're doing and what senior leadership is asking out of our warrant officers. Any questions on that? Any comments? And we're moving. All right. So we heard General McConville talk about we are at a war for talent. And we are in a war for talent, especially for our aviators. Here recently, maybe, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was recent. Ms. Nettles and I were traveling, and I believe it was American Airlines. And so we met 2 warrant officers, retired warrant officers, where one got out. One, the money was good in industry for him, and he's like, there was nothing that the Army was offering him that, enticed him to stay. And so therefore he became a pilot. And then there was one that got out because dual military assignment. and the Army would not work with he and his spouse for an assignment. And so we were not managing talent at all. We let someone escape from us that we definitely could have worked with that. And so we're in a war for talent, and we're going to always be in a war for talent. We just don't have the money to compete with industry in order to retain our warrant officers, right? But we have stories. Our stories can compel other people to come to us, right? And so we as warrant officers, we have to do a better job, I believe, in telling our stories. The American population don't find our stories out until they are already in uniform. And so as warrant officers, we are one pathway to success. We are one possibilities of many possibilities in which our American folks can be all you can be. And so what I am asking is for us as warrant officers, if we would go out and tell our stories within our communities. As Chief said today, 83% of our service, 83% of our new soldiers come from military homes. We don't want it to be a military business, a family business. We want it to be an American business. We want every young person and every parent in our country to know that the United States Army is a pathway to success, is a way that their citizen, their child, their son, their daughter, their spouse, friend, can be all you can be. And we need our warrant officers to go out there and to tell that story, right? And so we need our American population to gain trust in our warrant officers, trust in our Army. And this next slide kind of tells you, if you can see it, where we're at. Now, we're still doing really well. We're doing better than Congress when it comes to, trust in our military. But we're going down. We're going down. And it has nothing to do with woke. So any rumors that's out there about woke, it has nothing to do with woke, right? Many of our young Americans believe that if they join the Army, that their life gets put on hold, that they cannot pursue their dreams. That does not necessarily equal just being a soldier. They think they have to come in for 20 years. And so we're telling the story that you don't. If you're dreaming, if you want to be a Harvard business student, the Army can help you get there. Ask Mr. Plumlee. Anybody remember Plumlee? He played for Duke, won a championship with Duke, played for the NBA, Milwaukee Bucks, and also the New York Knicks, joined the Army, became a 75th Ranger, and then came out, and now he's in Harvard. The Army gave him opportunities and platforms for that, right? And Plumlee didn't know what a warrant officer was until he joined the Army. But now he's helping to tell the story about warrant officers because we've had some really good conversations. And so with that, what Army senior leadership is asking from warrant officers is that we help to acquire, develop, employ, and retain. If we want the best aviators, if we want the best warrant officer cohort, then we, warrant officers, we cannot wait until the soldiers or American citizens come to us. We have to go out there to them and tell our stories. Why become a warrant officer? Any questions? Feedback? Did I see a hand in the back? Okay. And then I'm not going to go into these too deep because I'm sure Mr. Rick Knowlton will do some of those. But here, warrant officer initiatives, right? When we started out in February, I think it was 2021? February 2021, we had 9 initiatives that the chief slapped the table and he said that we can move forward on. Since that time frame, yes, sir.
Can you hear me? How about now? Good? Yeah, in aviation, we often look at our crew chiefs and we say, okay, this is going to be we can see the potential in an aviator in that area. Can you kind of give us a little bit of background in all the 140 MOSs generally, of course, not each one, but when we see a crew chief and we take a look at him, we're like, oh, this would be actually not just a good aviator, but it would also be good in some of the other transportation, boat warrants, et cetera, and how we could take a look at them and how we can promote them as in the Army in some of the other warrant officer MOSs. That's
a great question. And what I was actually going to get at, because of the challenges with technical warrant officer accessions that we have, those shortages that's there. Oftentimes, we stay in our box based on our branch, right? And there's nothing wrong with advocating for our branch, because we want to build our branch. We want to build our team. We want to build the next you, the next me to be better, right, within our branch. But as a cohort, we need help building the cohort across all three compos, right? Dixon Carter is ready to get out of the Army. I have 20 years, maybe 22 years. A lot of our W3s are coming out, right, at 20 to 22 years. But they kind of want to still serve, not kind of, they want to serve, but they just want some stability. More so, it's about the family. The family wants some stability. Or maybe there's some medical conditions or something that's, whatever it is. We have to advocate for them going to the National Guard or going to the reserves, right? Talent management. I don't know all of the knowledge, skills, behaviors, or the attributes for 17 branches and over 40 specialties. But what I can identify is someone's will, their potential. Does this soldier have the will or the potential to be a good, you name the good, right? And then I marry them with someone. If I think you're going to be a really good 270 Alpha JAG, I marry you with someone within the JAG Corps to start shadowing with, or they can identify some of those KSBs or KSAs with that. I think what we have to do, and then for aviation, I believe many of our 151s in the aviation, right, they feel like they're out on an island all by themselves. If there are any 151s out here, okay, I hear you, all right. Right? You know, and some of our juniors, because they're like, where do I fit in? Do I fit in with aviation, or do I fit in with ordnance for maintenance? You know, like, where do I fit in with that? And so we have to do, we as a cohort, a better job with those MOSs, and they're not alone, but some of those MOSs that are very small, they're embedded with our larger population, like aviation, MI, SF, right? And then making sure we marry them with the right warrant officers to help mentor, train, and coach them for that. But we have to get out of our bubbles, and we have to really go and help the Army to acquire talent, right? And that's why for us as warrant officers, it's too many people that come in that don't know who we are until they're in uniform. And it's important that we get out. We have recruiting efforts. We have warrant officers now that are going out to those cities, and they're going out with USAREC, and they're going out and they're messaging, they're doing marketing, communication to help with recruiting, right? Because one of you sitting out there can inspire someone to come into our Army to serve. Maybe they never even knew about the call to serve, but they encounter a warrant officer, and now that kind of inspires them to serve with that. So does that answer your question with that? And so as you can see, we have some significant challenges and some shortages over there, right? And so we are definitely going out more. And yes, becoming a warrant officer, just like officer candidate school, is volunteer. A person can volunteer. They put in his or her package, their application, and they go through a sessions and a board. But there's nothing like going to someone and recognizing his or her talent for that, right? Like many of us for nominative positions, 011 Alpha positions, most of us didn't go running toward that 011 Alpha position. Someone saw some potential in us, in you, and came and asked if you would be interested in that, right? That's what we need to do when it comes to recruiting. The same thing is to take that initiative, not be afraid to go out into communities, go out into organizations, go out into formations, and to tell our story. And I'll pause there. So I'm giving the 10-minute warning back there. So I need to hear from you all, right? Everywhere I go, I always go back to the Pentagon with something to give the Army senior leaders, and this will be no different. To give them something, how can we better our cohort? How can we better our cohort in order to better our Army and to continue to serve our purpose and our mission? And so what's on your mind? Other than probably wine, beer, food. Yes, Mr. Pat.
Hey, good afternoon. Over the past couple years, I've had quite a few people reach out and try and come into the Warrant Officer Corps or cohort from the civilian sector. And we all understand the current recruiting goals we have and the issues that USAREC is having with bringing people in. The one common theme that I hear from every civilian that's applying to become a warrant officer is, my recruiter doesn't know the process. There's no standardized process at the, we'll say, enlisted run recruiting stations to really get it streamlined and get people in quickly. So half of them tend to throw up their arms and say, it's too difficult, I'm not dealing with this. They get an idea that the Army's disorganized, they don't know how to recruit people appropriately. How do we fix that?
So we're fixing that through USAREC. That you're absolutely right. Thank you so much for that. It's education, right? Making sure we have the right recruiters at these stations, and our one officer recruiters in particular, right? We have toyed around with the idea of having a one officer permanent recruiting team where that is their primary role and responsibility is for Army recruiting warrant officers. But it's really getting out to those recruiting commands. I would tell you the MI has I don't want to call it a program, but they go out to the different recruiting stations and the MEP station, right? And they talk to them about, what they're looking for in the MI branch, their specialty, right? They talk to them about that. They help them along with the process and with the application. So it's really educating our recruiters, right, on what to look for in the application. Now, the application process is still lengthy, not as lengthy as it used to be, but it's still a lengthy process, especially if they need waivers, any kind of waiver. And so what the Army senior leadership is looking at, they're truly looking at, and especially for like medical, they're looking at how do we streamline this process, i.e. we had a young man who played football his entire school year, high school year, right, has flat feet. Took the team to a championship, has 5 feet. We denied him coming into the Army, right? And so make it make sense. But on the medical professional side, they have a requirement. The requirement says, right, if you have flat feet, that you will require a waiver and depend on the severity of it. So we have to look at our policies really and go through our policies and to see, does it still make sense today as it did over 20 plus years ago with that? But it's education, sir. It's education.
All right, here we go. So a comment to your last question. I assume the audience here is mixed compo 1, 2, and 3. So the National Guard has what's called a WOSM in every state, a Warrant Officer Strength Manager, and they are key in how we get warrant officers into our units. I don't know if active duty cabs or divisions have a similar thought process or a WOSM that can do that on behalf of the cohort, but it's worked really well for us.
So, and that's where we've gotten the idea of the one officer. Actually, Mr. Pat Nelligan, who's a CCWO for Army Reserve warrant officer. And so he and I, along with Chief Nettles, who is the senior warrant officer station commander for recruiting in the DMV area, are talking a lot about that. Some of the organizations, so to answer your question, it's not a TDA or MTO billet, right? But some of the branches, they have created within house how they assess, how they go out to the communities, and how they recruit, not just warrant officers, but recruit soldiers. So there's a collective effort in that, but it's not mandated across the branches. And to Mr. Curran's point, some do it better than others, right? If we can just standardize this is how we are going to do it and execute that, it would be so much better. And so those are the initiatives that we're really trying to work on. It is the goal of myself, along with Rick Knowlton, CAC, TRADOC FORCECOM, CCWOs, and of course Army National Guard and Reserves, is not to look at what's good for Compo 1, 2, and 3, what's good for AG branch, what's good for Aviation SF branch, but what's good for the cohort. Right? What are those things that can work best for the cohort? Understanding there's no one size fits all. For example, direct appointment and direct commissioning. We're still trying to figure it out, the right size for how we direct appoint and how we direct commission, in order to help out with recruiting efforts and retention efforts for that. It's already out there that we can do it, but we're just trying to make sure that we work it out the right way so that it doesn't impact a soldier's career or someone coming in for the future. I see you. 2 minutes. She's giving me the 2-minute finger. Okay. She is hard. She is doing the right things. Anything else? What else? Nothing on your mind? Everything is going great? Mr. Mike has something. I know Mr. Kilgore has something, too.
Steve's always got something. All right. Ma'am, there was a rumor that we're going to promote you to W6 or something, or your next person. What's going on with that?
Let me tell you something. It's just a rumor. It's just a rumor. So what we're looking at is, and it will not happen with one each Yolandria, Dixon, Carter, but we're looking at codifying this position, and we've been doing it for quite a bit. What we didn't realize, because I have a really big staff, myself and Miss Nettles. And so what we didn't realize is how much it goes into trying to codify a position at the Army senior level, right? Force structure, growing, staffing, what does that mean to Congress? Right? How does that operate? What does that look like? And so we've done paperwork for it. We're getting a lot of coaching on how to do it. And so we're also looking at changing it from, because Senior Warrant Officer Advisor is an additional duty. It's not, right? It's not a CCWO. It's an additional duty. And so if for any of you all that have additional duties out there, you know how that works, right? Trying to do dual or triple hatted with some things. But I enjoy what I do. I enjoy being an AG warrant officer, assistant executive officer to the Chief of Staff of the Army. And I enjoy being the Senior Warrant Officer Advisor because I'm learning so much across the entire cohort with that. If it is codified, as you were, when it is codified, right? When it is codified, I believe that the name will change. What will it be? I'm not going to say what it will be because you guys will hold me to that. But it will not be an additional duty. It will be separated. It will kind of mirror Army National Guard and Reserves in terms of staffing for that. And will there be an identifier for the rank? Probably not. But we'll see. We got to take baby steps first, right? And so if we can get what we need, then we'll start working on how does that look in the future to identify that person as the something other than Senior Warrant Officer Advisor to the Chief of Staff of the Army. What else? How do we retain our warrant officers? What are some of your recommendations on how we retain? I don't have $50,000 to give every warrant officer. I just don't. For 3 years, and then after that third year, they're like, I'm out of here unless you give me another $50,000, right? Anyone? How do you think we can retain? This is a quiet group. Stabilization. I would tell you, AIM cycle. You guys like the AIM cycle? It's working for everybody? Right, exactly. And so, so we have been talking about how do we better, right, manage our warrant officers. And some of the things that we kind of considered is having one cycle for AIM cycle. And Mr. Knowlton can talk a little bit about that. I know they only have 7 to 10 minutes, but I'm telling you, he's got a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of stuff that he's been doing behind the scenes for talent management and having it for one cycle. Some stability. Some of you may have heard the chief talk about it in a talent management conference, having people to stabilize for 5 to 7 years, right, at one duty station. I'm not a football, fan. I watch football because it's on all 100 TVs in my house. But I was at a conference and I heard General Pappas talk about the Tom Brady. And he said they didn't trade Tom Brady after the first Super Bowl. They didn't trade him after the second. They didn't trade him after the third, the fourth, the fifth, sixth, and I think the seventh. Right? They kept him on the team because they identified his talent and that he could take them somewhere. So why is it that we are trading our soldiers, and I said our warrant officers, after 36 months because it's time for you to rotate? Why? Now, don't get me wrong. I clearly understand that some of us need to rotate. It's time to go. Not just PCS, but it's probably time to retire. Right? I get that. But in all seriousness, if you're relevant, you're meeting mission, you're accomplishing the mission, you're doing everything that the Army is asking you to do, and 36 months comes, why am I moving you if you want to stay? And it makes sense for you to stay. But instead, I have to rely upon high school stabilizations. If you have kids. If you don't, you're probably renting a kid so that you can stay there a little longer, right? So 5 to 7 years stability. And that was the number one thing, seriously, that our W3 said that's why they're getting out of the Army at 20 to 22 years is stability. Our family members are more vocal than they have been in the past, and I love it. I love it. And our soldiers are looking at family members and their desires, right? What does our family member want? All the way to our spouse and our children. And they're making decisions, and there's nothing wrong with that. We recruit soldiers, but we retain families. And if I can't retain that family, a lot of our W3s are getting out because they're saying their family is tired. And they're like, the spouses are working now. And so for those of you who are married and you have a spouse or you have a significant other, you know how difficult it is to move that spousal employment. The beautiful thing what the Army has done is that for spousal employment, if they're like in the healthcare or education field and they have certifications, that they can now move on military orders and they don't have to be recertified when they go to that state. So that's a big plus, for that. Mrs. McConville helped with that. But stability is the number one thing. And so 5 to 7 years, one cycle, doing that. So some of the things, and I don't know, Rick, you can raise your hand if you plan on talking about this really quick. So I just want to throw some things out. So we have a board that's in session right now, right? Everybody aware of that? Does anybody have the results? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But, so below the zone, right? Everybody's tracking below the zone for W3, W4 on this board. What else are you tracking on this board? Merit-based promotion, right? Everybody understand what merit-based promotion is? Non-sequence number. When the official board results are released and we start promoting, that person will get promoted first. Doesn't matter what zone of consideration you're in, below the zone, primary zone, or above the zone. If you have an MB by the name, there will not be a sequence number, but you will be the first to get promoted. And then everybody else will get promoted based on date of birth, date of rank. All right, so I think that's a big deal for that. Promotion. We're looking at tying PME to promotion because right now, guess what? There's no requirement, right? We're probably like, boo. But let me tell you how that works for the one officer cohort. I had the opportunity to sit in several meetings, budgeting meetings, TAA meetings, POM meetings. And I was looking at slides, and on all of the slides, it had from Department Army of Civilians to Sergeant Majors to E6s, E7s, and E8s to the Sergeant Majors Academy to War College, ILE, everything. And it had a dollar amount by each one of them. And I got kind of upset because I'm like, well, what about the warrant officers? But what I recognize is that's how much the Army invests in them to go to school in order to get a return on the investment. To be an SES, you have to invest and you have to go to this school in order to be an SES, right, at this level. To go to Sergeant Major's Academy, right, you go to the Sergeant Major's Academy, you come back, there's a return of investment on that where you have to go. So for every one of those categories, there was a return of investment that was tied to schooling. And there's nothing for us tied to schooling. You know, we hear Army senior leadership say, I want my warrant officers to be more technical depth, right? Have more technical depth. I need them to be more of a subject matter expert. And then you have some of the Army senior leadership that want warrant officers to be more strategic. And so we can have a balance of all of that, but can we get some education? And the answer, we only need about $27 million. Cool, $27 million. Not a whole lot, right? But what's the return on investment if Dixon Carter is not going to school? Because I don't have to go. So we're looking at how do we tie PME, one officer PME, to promotion, right, for that. But in doing that, it's not just the act of doing that, tying it. That's why we have to make it relevant. That's why Mr. Kilgore was pushing so hard for KSBs and KSAs, and now Mr. Aaron Anderson, who's the CCWO at CAC, is pushing so hard for KSAs and KSBs so that we can make sure that we get the right PME for our branches and that it is relevant, it makes sense, and we send folks to that. Also, another thing that's happening out at CAC, before it was an elective for battalion commanders and brigade commanders and sergeant majors to come in, you know, to learn more about warrant officers. Well, the chief has said now he wants all of those, especially non-aviation or sustainment, he wants those maneuver commanders to go in there and sergeant majors to learn about warrant officers. They blew them away when they found out they had over 40 warrant officers in their brigade. They're like, where are they? No, where are they? Where did you put them at? Where are they? Right? And so I get reports back and how commanders and sergeant majors are so excited about learning more about warrant officers. We have sergeant majors now who are telling us, hey, have you thought about having this MOS as a direct appointment or commission for warrant officer? Because the likelihood of them making E7, E8, and definitely E9 is slim to none based on the requirements in their MOS. They're going out there and they're getting that talent for us, right? Joint. A lot of joint services want to become warrant officers, aviators. And it is so difficult for joint to become an aviator warrant officer, right? Because of what they lack, some of the things that they lack. But I would tell you, our warrant officer recruiters are getting after it, and they are helping them to become warrant officers, putting in their applications, marrying them up with the right senior warrant officer in aviation. So a lot of really good things are happening. We're still, future initiatives that we're working on is Army competitive categories, right? And modeling that kind of like what the enlisted does in the O grade. Because we have two boards, right? Two promotion boards. We have the aviators, and then we have the tech, which includes aviation techs for that. So lots going on in our warrant officer cohort across all three compos. A lot of challenges that are still happening that's out there. Nothing is perfect. It will never be perfect. but we're working on how to perfect it according to what we need and require in our warrant officer cohort. And we cannot do that without you all. We can't do that without the support of our families. We cannot do this without the support of our soldiers for life, which includes our veterans and our retirees. We cannot do it without our civilians. It takes an army truly for us to get to where we need to go in people, readiness, and modernization. I need our warrant officers to be present, to be relevant, and to have fun while you're doing it. So as General McConville gets ready to transition out in August, and he gets ready to transition, some of these initiatives over to the next CSA, pending our confirmation, it will not change for the cohort. It will not change for the cohort. We will still need the same energy, the same excitement, the same enthusiasm, the same will that we have now in order to move our cohort in the right direction. And so if you all don't have anything else, because everything is going extremely well, and I say yay to that, I'm simply going to close this by saying again, I thank you all for your time. I hold the title, but every last one of us, we hold the position. We hold the position. Please tell our stories. Please go out there and tell our communities what we do as a warrant officer cohort. It matters today just as it mattered yesterday. We are not successful without the warrant officer cohort. And any Army senior leader will tell you that. Many of them are asking for warrant officers to be a part of their formation, not just active component, but National Guard and Reserves. So again, I am honored to serve in this position. I have a few more months, maybe a year or so that's left, and I promise you that until my time is done, I am going to continue to fight and have the will to get us where we need to be. So again, thank you so much for your time. Mr. Mike, where are you, sir? Again, thank you. Appreciate you, and I appreciate Quade. Thank you.
Well, man, before you take off, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. And for those that you don't know, I mean, Miss DC, Dixon Carter, a.k.a. the Chief's Chief, she's got 5 decades in this uniform. So do I. We both came in 1989, I believe. Combat proven. We just wanted to say thank you very much for spending time with us today, and just want to say safe trip back home and come back anytime. All right? Okay. All right. We're going to take a